Good evening. I'm Karen Hudis, and your host and executive producer for this series on the network of global corporate control that has been coming to you from the studio of DCTV since May. Carmen Stanley is the producer and director, Mo Jackson is doing the audio and teleprompter, and Kofi Tendai is our floor director, and I'm very grateful to them. The subject of this series is the network of global corporate control, which is a huge conglomerate that has been hiding at the center of the world's financial system ever since the previous ice age. I am the lawyer for the Global Debt Facility, which is a trust that contains the world's monetary gold reserves. The Global Debt Facility is administered by the 188 Ministers of Finance and Development on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF. Today we're going to discuss the Magna Carta. What does an 800-year-old agreement between England and the Vatican Holy See have to do with a network of global corporate control? Does the largest corporation on the planet, the Vatican, secretly rule the United States as well as many other countries? Once the secret is out of the bag, the answer is no, and that's the purpose of this series. We are disclosing these secret arrangements. That's why it's important to understand hidden claims of the Vatican, so that you understand exactly how it is that we have ended this corruption for once and for all. In an earlier segment, we were talking about secret societies. All roads really do lead to Rome. The Order of the Society of Jesus, which is also known as the Jesuits, was commissioned in 1540 by Pope Paul III. The primary mission of the Jesuits was to make covert war on all heretics, to end the Protestant movement that was then sweeping Europe. The Jesuits also created many missions throughout the world and developed an extraordinary intelligence organization. One method of gathering intelligence was via the confessional, which the Jesuits had created. Eventually, the Jesuits became the most powerful order of the Catholic Church. If the agenda of the Jesuits, as determined by the Jesuit general, differed from the Pope, quite often the Pope would meet with death, usually by poisoning. Eventually, the Jesuits caused so much murder and mayhem in Europe that their order was outlawed in 1773. The superior general of the Jesuits is also known as the Black Pope. Today's Black Pope is Adolfo Nicolas. There's also a Gray Pope above these two. He's referred to as the Gray Pope because he's between the Black Pope and the White Pope, but he's actually in charge. And today's Gray Pope is Pepe Orsini of the Roman Maximus clan. He's the king of the Holy Roman Papal bloodlines. And he is above the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, and he's in line and equal stature to the families that are in the bloodlines. That's the Breakspear, Aldobrandini, Farnese, Somaglia, and other families in the papal bloodlines. This elite stretches all the way back to Egypt's dynasties in 300 BC. That's called the Ptolemaic dynasties. The Pope and the Holy See control the city of London, and people who have seen earlier segments of this series know that in 1871 the United States went into bankruptcy because Revolutionary War debts fell due. When the colonies were created, the King of England was bound to the Treaty of May 15, 1213 between England and the Vatican. In 1208, the King of England refused to accept Stephen Langton as the Archbishop of Canterbury, and the king was excommunicated from the Catholic Church by Pope Innocent III because he was disobedient and he was breaking all the contracts with the crown. Both the Pope and the king owed money to the crown bankers, so the Pope had to rein in a naughty king in order to avoid default to the crown. Faced with defeat by the forces aligned against him by the Vatican, King John ran for cover and sought to regain the support of the Pope. He returned the title to his kingdoms of England and Ireland back to the Pope, and then the United Kingdom became vassals. He swore submission and loyalty to the Pope, and he accepted Langton as Archbishop of Canterbury. He offered the Pope a bond of fealty, that means loyalty, and homage, and he was paying an annual tribute, that's a fee, of 1,000 marks. That's now equivalent to more than 666 pounds sterling. And he also returned church property that he had seized when he rebelled against it. And in July 1213, King John was forgiven. He wasn't excommunicated anymore, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, Langton, returned. On the 3rd of October, King John ratified his surrender of his kingdoms to the Pope. And the Pope is claiming ownership of everything and everyone on earth. That's including us. That's you too. The Pope owns you. On the 21st of April, 1214, in Rome, the Pope accepted King John's surrender of his kingdoms and his pledge, together with the monies that were paid in tribute. And in July, Pope Innocent III erased the interdict, that's a condemnation against the English. And what does the Treaty of 1213 have to do with the ownership of the North American colonies? The Vatican owns the colonies, and he let the king serve, the Pope let the king serve as the manager for the whole enterprise. The Vatican was very busy at that point fighting the Crusades and expanding the kingdom. Let me give you a sample of what the Treaty of 1213 actually said. The original treaty is located in the archives in London, and PhDs are allowed to see it. There's a copy, an accurate copy of a translation that's made available, and this Treaty of 1213 remains in power to this day. It says, and I quote, "The King's concessions of May 15, 1213 to the Pope, we wish it to be known to all of you through this our charter, furnished with our seal, of our own good and spontaneous will, and by the common counsel of our barons, do offer and freely concede," and I'm cutting out a few parts, "to our Lord Pope Innocent and to his Catholic successors, the whole kingdom of England and the whole kingdom of Ireland, with all their rights and appurtenances." That means the things that are attached to their rights. And here's the part that's really going to get you. "Binding our successors and our heirs by our wife forever, in similar manner, to perform fealty and show homage to him who shall be chief pontiff at that time, and to the Roman Church without demur." And that's concessions of May 15, 1213 to the Pope. And what did the Pope say in response to King James? "This offer and concession so piously and wisely made we regard as acceptable and valid, and we take under the protection of St. Peter and of ourselves your person and the persons of your heirs, together with the said kingdoms and their appurtenances, and all other goods which are now reasonably held or may in future be so held, to you and to your heirs, according to the terms set out above, and by the general advice of our brethren, we grant the said kingdoms in fief and confirm them by this privilege, on condition that any of your heirs, on receiving the crown, will publicly acknowledge this as a fief held by the Supreme Pontiff and of the Roman Church, and will take an oath of fealty to them. Let no man, therefore, have power to infringe this document of our concession and confirmation, or presume to oppose it. If any man dare to do so, let him know that he will incur the anger of Almighty God and of Saints Peter and Paul, his apostles. Amen, amen, amen." We should then look forward a few centuries, 6 centuries to be exact, to the Treaty of Verona in 1845. The Pope at that time and the British monarch were both trustees of the American National Trust, and they agreed that the representative form of government was incompatible with the divine right of kings and with papal supremacy. And so they both acted in secret, and they breached the trust. The British monarch issued letters of marque and reprisal. That means that he was punishing the members of the colonies, and he assigned the British Crown Commercial Company, which issued licenses to privateers to attack American vessels in international jurisdictions of the law. That's the beginning of the Bar Association licenses. Now, maybe we can get a picture up of the countries that are using common law. Mark Dillon was the one who suggested that we use common law to obtain our birthright, to take back those agreements that I was just reading you. And the way we're doing this is because of this trust, the Global Debt Facility that I'm the lawyer for. Bruce Lewis has drawn up commercial liens that are now in place on the personal assets of agents of the network of global corporate control. They thought that they had the right to keep us from our birthright, the gold that's in the Global Debt Facility. Common law is in the courts, as well as it runs parallel to corporate governments, and it comes back to before the time of the Magna Carta. It's the true law. It's the actual foundation of law, including the Bible's 10 Commandments and constitutions, maxims of law. These are more important than the statutes and the corporate rules and regulations. Those are a mere color of law. A real being, a human being, can say, I stand upon the common law. It takes a real being, not a corporation, to stand on things. Fictions do not stand. The corporate schemes that are now in place are actually fraud. They've come up with a taxation scheme, which they call the legal system. In Latin, system. Everything in a law library is copyrighted by the English elite bankers, and technically it takes bar attorneys to use this material. If people who are not members of the bar use it without bracketing it, that means saying that they're not actually entitled to use it, then they should be punished because they're not entitled to use what the bar lawyers are supposed to be entitled to use and are licensed. This is an obvious scam. Now, a lot of people have been curious about what these commercial liens are and what they can actually do. One of the emails that I got this morning was somebody who was asking me what the reaction of the people who have gotten those liens is. That's including Barack Obama, that's Joe Biden, that's the Secretary of the Treasury, Jacob Lew, that's in the World Bank, that's Jim Yum Kim, and in the IMF, that's Lagarde, Christine Lagarde, and there are a few others. The chiefs of police of the District of Columbia also have liens, and so does the chief of police in Montgomery County. He has a lien because they have been preventing the world from getting back the gold that they're entitled to, that's in the Global Debt Facility. And a lot of people are wondering what's going to happen next. I'm going to be leaving to go to the annual meetings of the World Bank and IMF. They're held in Peru between the 9th and the 11th. And I'll be reporting back. And you'll find out whether we're going forward with the global currency reset or whether these agreements that I was just reading you from the Magna Carta and also binding the colonies, including the United States, whether we're going to be left stuck in them. And the reason why I'm confident that we are going to be taking back our gold is because of the fact that people are now realizing about these secret agreements And when they're no longer secret, when there's sunlight on them, they obviously can't remain in effect. Let me tell you about the countries that are common law countries. Maybe you can put the map up. That's Australia, Barbados, Brunei, Canada, England, Wales, Hong Kong, India, Malaysia, New Zealand, the Republic of Ireland, Scotland, Singapore, and South Africa. Now, we have another form of law, which is the law that the bankers like to use. That's admiralty law. During the Roman Empire, they divided the law into two types. On earth, there's land, and on the sea, there's water. And the admiralty law is the law of the water. And the law of the land is the law of the people. And the laws of the sea and water are international. They're the banking laws. All of the American courts are pseudo-courts. They're not the Article III courts that we're entitled to under our Constitution. The judges that are sitting in our federal courts are simply corporate administrative officers. They've designed them to resemble courts, and the judges are betraying their oaths of office because they're simply executive administrators. The purpose of the pseudo-corporate courts is just to settle contract disputes. George Washington's government was military in structure. If either party refuses to participate, these courts cannot become involved, and the dispute is dead in the water. My use of the term dead in the water is accurate because these pseudo-courts are unconstitutional courts of admiralty under the international law of the sea. The Washington Monument was completed in 1884 as a tribute to George Washington and his military government. It's actually a sea-level obelisk that infers that all of America is underwater, and thus it can be subject to the laws of admiralty, as opposed or contrary to the intended constitutional civilian government under common law. The commercial liens which I've put on Allied Barton, who's the security guard owned by the network of global corporate control, and on the public officials who are ignoring their oaths of office and serving the network of global corporate control, they're a bridge from maritime law to common law. And the way I can do this is because the common law means that individuals cannot escape their individual liability. They are obligated, they can't escape from the common law. And the liens are effective. They hold these officials accountable. I have made a statement in something called an affidavit, and I sent it 3 times to all of the people who have their property is now under lien. And I said, if you disagree with any of my statements, you can disagree, and if you like, we can go in front of a jury and let the jury decide what the truth is. And what I said in the affidavit was specifically that the gold in the global debt facility belongs to the people and has been determined to be returned to the people in their currency, and that these officials were acting outside of their offices in preventing that global currency reset. And now the officials are liable for the damages for blocking the global currency reset. And the reason that we need this reset is because of the fact that the paper currencies are going to crash. We need to replace them with the gold before they do crash. This is what happened just before the Dark Ages. And in an earlier segment, we saw a clip how Ronald Reagan was working together with Ferdinand Marcos and had actually issued treasury dollars. The difference between paper currency being issued by the Federal Reserve and paper currency being issued by the Treasury is that one is constitutional and the other is not. And also, you're paying interest on the currency to private banks. The Federal Reserve is a private bank. Why is it that you don't know any of this in the mainstream media? That's because the network of global corporate control has been buying up all of the media, and they've been giving you propaganda. In this day and age of the internet, a cover-up of this magnitude is bound to end. And that is what the power transition model from the U.S. Department of Defense has been predicting with 90 to 95% likelihood. And there's a Gallup poll which is now showing that Americans distrust their media. 6 in 10 Americans say that their trust ranges from not very much to none at all. Those surveyed were asked about the media, whether the media reported the news accurately and fairly. Only 1/3 of the respondents said that they had a fair amount of trust in the mass media, such as newspapers, TV, and radio. And only 7% had a great deal of trust and confidence that the mass media reports the news. 10 years ago, a similar survey by Gallup showed that there was an even split, 50-50, among Americans regarding their trust or whether they distrusted the media. According to the poll results, the last time the majority of Americans trusted their media was in 1976. This is a huge indictment. It's also significant that the article that reported this Gallup poll was coming from, I believe that was Sputnik News, from the Russians. Just 2 weeks ago, they ran another article with a survey talking about whether United States citizens wanted a coup if they found out that the Constitution was not being followed. And there were a significant number, I believe over 1/3, that believed that a coup would be in order if the Constitution was not in effect. And as we know, the Constitution is not in effect because of this bankruptcy in 1871, which is when there became a second secret constitution in effect. In an earlier segment, we were talking about Article 5 in the Constitution, which says that when 2/3 of the state legislatures request applies to the Congress for an amendment, that there needs to be a constitutional convention. And we were also talking about how some of the organizations that are trying to organize a constitutional convention are actually, they're not real grassroots organizations. There's something called AstroTurf. The leaders at the top of those organizations are actually secretly working for the Vatican, trying to prevent us from returning back to our Constitution and no longer paying tribute to the Vatican, which the Vatican, as you see from those agreements that we were talking about, the Vatican thinks they're entitled to continue to collect that. And Ronald Reagan did a survey to see how much of our income taxes were staying in the country and how much were leaving. And it turned out that 100% of our income taxes were going to the Crown in the United Kingdom. And from there, as you've seen, the Crown owes fealty to the Vatican. And so that's where our taxes were actually ending up, in the Vatican. Once we know this, it's obviously not acceptable. And once people know that some of the people at the top of the United States are really just working for the network of global corporate control, they're not really working in their offices, and all of the federal judges are not really serving, they've broken their oaths, it's pretty clear that this situation is not going to continue. And that's where we actually are. Just this past week, I got an email from a person who has very good contacts inside the military and also with the militia. And he said that 70% of the military and militia now understands what we've just been talking about, that there's this secret arrangement, that there are hidden laws, that we're undersea, that we're applying maritime law rather than any of the law that we recognize or our regular Constitution. So the situation is really in a state of flux. I've called it an interregnum, and the fortunate thing about this is that we do not have to descend into chaos. It's very clear that with the Global Debt Facility and with the Board of Governors and with the agreement to have the global currency reset, and the fact is that the Federal Reserve is actually, they are in something called receivership, which is to say that the Federal Reserve owes us more than we owe them because there were bonds that were issued in the 1930s to collect gold. There was over 200 trillion of these bonds. They're called Treaty of Versailles bonds. And those bonds have been accruing and compounding interest. They're now worth over $2 quadrillion. That means that the banks owe us more than we owe them. And that means that we can liquidate them. We can carve them up. We can return them to the governments in each and every country. And there are a lot of people who naturally are they're concerned how we're going to accomplish this. And they're absolutely right to be concerned. And it's going to be very important for people to pay attention to what's going on. This is not going to be easy when you've got the propaganda coming from the mainstream media and also the alternate media. About 80% of that media is also owned and controlled by the network of global corporate control. In another segment, we're going to meet some of the people who are working to make sure that people do understand what's actually going on and to get information to people and from the people, because we're not going to be ruled at the center by the Vatican, and we're certainly not going to be ruled at the center by the World Bank and IMF Board of Governors. The function of the Board of Governors is simply going to be to return the gold back into the currencies and to make sure that the gold doesn't go missing. It's very simple, but it's not going to be the function of the Board of Governors to tell the countries how to govern themselves or the citizens in those countries how to govern themselves. Thank you for listening to another segment of the Network of Global Corporate Control. We've discussed the Magna Carta and how the Pope thinks he's entitled to keep on collecting interest on our currencies in a scam known as country debt using maritime law. We have reasserted our right to stand on the common law, on land, and take back our international monetary gold reserves in the Global Debt Facility. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Hudis. Today's program is about Mark Twain's statement, "The report of my death is greatly exaggerated." Mark Twain is one of my favorite American heroes. And the reason why I'm taking that quote from Mark Twain is because of the recent headlines, which are talking about how the United States is in a terrible situation, that there's extreme debt that's going to cause a global meltdown, and the U.S. is one of the two countries that's in the biggest debt. Japan is the other. The United States is gearing up for an economic apocalypse, according to some of the pundits in the media. And there's another headline about Russia and China that are creating an entirely different gold market. All of these stories are absolutely correct, but they're forgetting the most important story of all, and that's the story that we're telling you about. That story is about the Global Debt Facility, which is a trust that's containing a lot of wealth, including all of the world's monetary gold reserves. That's administered by the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, And as a lawyer who was working in the World Bank for 20 years and who was tutored by Aaron Brochus, who was the longest serving general counsel, he told me what to expect when I went into the World Bank, because he was there when it started to go really corrupt. A lot of people are concerned about the world's wealth being under the control of the World Bank and IMF because they see the terrible things that the Bretton Woods institutions are doing. It's called the Bretton Woods institutions because that is the site of the conference in 1944. It's a ski resort in New Hampshire. And the Bretton Woods institutions have been captured by the network of global corporate control. That is one big company that is controlling the world's capital markets, and it contains the 60 central banks, and it prints money for free and charges all of the countries interest on their debt. And it has been responsible for a lot of the problems that we're talking about. And because this network controls the media, many people don't look behind the headlines in the mainstream media, and at least 80% of the alternative media. I'm very grateful to the people here at DCTV for giving this program the opportunity to tell people what's really going on. We have been putting the segments on YouTube, and if you're interested to find out how people react to the documents that we have posted, proving all of the statements that we've made, some of the very concerning things that we've reported are, for example, the fact that there was an attempt to nuke Charleston on the 7th of October 2013. We've shown how there's been seismograph records, there's been eyewitness reports of how the nuclear convoy with an active live bomb landed in Charleston Air Force Base, and we also talked about how the naval cables were intercepted by the Russians. And we have a very obviously serious situation, but one of the things that we have that has been really helping us is it's called a power transition model, which uses game theory to show how coalitions form. That came to the World Bank in 2004, and it has been on track. It's 90 to 95% accurate. We have experience whenever there's an argument between the experts and the model wins, because what it shows is how the various parties interact to form the coalitions. And I was brought into the World Bank by Ibrahim Shihada, who was the general counsel of the OPEC, that's the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And I was at the World Bank for 20 years, and the board inside the World Bank, that's 25 executive directors, 8 of them represent the largest economies, and the other executive directors are in groups of countries. They got to know me, and they understood that I was there simply to give the countries voice. And that is why they have allowed me to represent the Global Debt Facility, which, as I said, represents the world's monetary gold reserves. And one of the people who criticized some of the things that we've been doing said that I really had to focus in the beginning on what's newsworthy. So let me tell you what I think is probably the most newsworthy thing, and that is that the Board of Governors, that's 188 ministers of finance, and they act through something called the Development Committee, which is 25 ministers of finance. I'm in touch with these ministers. I hand deliver the letters to the embassies and ask for the embassies to convey them to the ministers of finance. And what we have said to the company that is the security agency, they're called Allied Barton, and they have been refusing to allow me to go into the World Bank. What we said to Allied Barton was that if Allied Barton did not allow me into the World Bank, they should simply quit the premises. They were fired. They actually were fired a couple of years ago, and there was another security firm that was prepared to take their place, but we were not able to get the disbursements to the replacement firm, and that firm has now decided that it didn't want to be involved with a confrontation with a network of global corporate control. But the Board of Governors understands that we are now in a situation where we have got to act. That's because the paper currencies are going to fail. Paper currencies always fail, and because we have the world's monetary gold, what we are going to do is we are going to there's a new technology where you press the gold very thin and you put it in what's like a plastic envelope, but it handles just like currency. You have the exact value of the bill inside with gold inside that envelope, and all of the countries are going to be minting that currency. It's going to be their own currency. For the European countries, they're going to have to decide whether they want to go back to their individual currencies or whether they want to stay in the European Union. All of these decisions are going to be made by the countries themselves. We are not talking about a one world order. What we are talking about, though, is we are talking about the United States ending its state capture. It is now the United States is now in a situation called interregnum. That's because the United States Congress has been lying to the American people. They have refused to tell the American people that they have been declaring a state of emergency behind closed doors, and we are in a military dictatorship where people don't really know it, but they do if they look at all of the documentary proof that we have, and we have been covering all of the legal implications. The legal profession has been lying to people systematically. So have the accountants, so have the journalists, and so have most of the politicians. Some of the politicians are doing their jobs. For example, we have several members of Parliament in the United Kingdom that have asked George Osborne why he has not accepted the offer of gold from the global debt facility. All of the ministers of finance have received this offer, and whenever anybody gets in touch with me, and it's very easy to find me, you either email me, and Carmen, maybe you could show the email address. Thank you. And I answer my emails. Sometimes it's just a one-liner because you can imagine I'm quite busy. And the way things work, a lot of people want to know who's working, who's in this, we call it the Coalition for the Rule of Law. It's not tightly knit because I have to be reporting to the Board of Governors, and I cannot delegate. I have got to be there and accountable, and therefore, for example, this week, some people were asking me whether I would allow them to set up a website to describe what the global debt facility was, and I had to turn them down, but I also got an email from somebody in Africa who's been lecturing, going around his country and lecturing people, and that's what people have to do. And they also, in the United States, have to get in touch with their county executives, because the county executives have accepted the offer of monetary gold, and we are now ready to start printing it. And in the interim, there are bills that were printed by Ronald Reagan. He didn't issue them because he was shot by Hinckley to prevent him from doing that. But we have those bills, and those can be issued in the interim until we finish getting it's called Aurum, the gold that's going to be minted from the gold in the global debt facility. And there's also local currencies. We've talked a little bit about that, and we're going to be devoting in the future a program on exactly what the local communities can be doing. But the most important thing, I think, is just to understand that there is a coalition for the rule of law, and we are going to be okay. And you do not have to get so frightened by all of these terrible, we call them fear porn stories that are appearing in the controlled media. Because, as I said, the chances that we come out of this transition, it's a transition, and the chances that we come out of this transition smoothly are 90 to 95%. And you will know, a lot of people ask me, what is the timing for this? As I told you, this really, in a lot of respects, depends on how active the people who are listening to me are in holding their politicians accountable, because this is a peaceful transition. We've also been debating about whether some of the people that have been colluding with the network of global corporate control ought to be punished. And it's very simple. If this is a peaceful transition, if we're threatening to put these people in jail, we're not going to have a transition. And it's much more important that we all survive than that some people are punished. I think if you, we've had a debate about this. If you think about it, you'll understand that maybe it doesn't feel so good to know that you're not going to be punishing people who have been keeping people in slavery. Maybe it doesn't feel so good, but we really don't have any choice if we have got to transition all of us together. Now, we're going to have a discussion about the world's gold next week. That's a program that's been pre-taped. But when you're trying to figure out how all of this is going to work, you have to understand that Germany now realizes that their gold is also in the global debt facility. It is not in their Bundesbank. And same thing for the Netherlands, same thing for every single country. Your gold is not in your central bank, and those central banks are actually insolvent. That's because there is something called the Treaty of Versailles bonds, and they've been accruing interest since the 1930s. They're now valued above $2 quadrillion, and that's going to offset country debt. So anybody who's worried about whether they're going to be able to pay back their country debt, including Greece, you're not going to have to. It's going to be offset against what the central banks owe us. And one of the things that happened this week is that the Federal Reserve in New York announced that it's moving to Chicago, and people wanted to know why. And I was able to explain the reason why. That is because I have filed what's called financing statements, because the Federal Reserve owes money to the global debt facility. That's these Treaty of Versailles bonds, and you're allowed to file financing statements, which is what I did in 10 of the states. And one of the states, Illinois, Jesse White, the Secretary of State, wrote a letter saying that he was going to invalidate that financing statement. And under the statute, he had no right, because the World Bank is a regulated bank. That's because the National Advisory Council on International Monetary and Financial Policies oversees the World Bank. Who's on the NAC? It's chaired by the Secretary of the Treasury. It's got the chairman of the Federal Reserve on it. It's got the State Department Secretary of State on it. It's got the economic agencies, the Commerce Department, and all of these people they understand, because I've been in touch with them many, many times. They understand that they're not doing their job, because the World Bank has a huge corruption problem. The financial statements are not accurate, and that is why I was supposed to be reinstated. And when this didn't happen, the United States contribution to the capital increase was withheld. And that's when Secretary Geithner lied to Congress and said that they had met the conditions. And I went right to Congress and showed that that the Secretary of the Treasury had been lying, and that's when he had to resign. So we in the Board of Governors of the World Bank know full well that the financing statement in Chicago against the Federal Reserve is valid, and that's what we told the Federal Reserve. There's a picture of a big fish and a little fish, Carmen. I don't know if you can show that, but that shows that the network of global corporate control is going to be wound down. Some people were asking, what does in receivership mean? That means that the right to decide what happens is determined by the Board of Governors, not by the Board of the Federal Reserve. When is this actually going to happen? It's probably going to happen pretty soon, but you'll have to stay tuned to find out exactly how we go with the transition. One of the other groups that's trying to steal the world's gold, that's the royalty, and there's a fellow ASM, and Anthony Santiago Martin, he claimed that he had the authority, but he absolutely does not. If you read the documents in the global debt facility, it says very clearly that none of the money in the global debt facility can be dispersed unless the Board of Governors have authenticated the authority of that person. Now, Ferdinand Marcos was the first lawyer, and he set it up so that there were many potential people who were assigned the right to sign for the global debt facility. And the way the Board of Governors is going to handle this, they're not just going to give carte blanche to one individual, because although Ferdinand Marcos was able to stand up to the risk of corruption, we don't believe that one individual can, and that's why anybody who says that they are something called M1, that's the person who's authorized to sign for the global debt facility, there isn't going to be another M1. The Board of Governors, for each and every transaction out of the global debt facility, that authorized signatory is going to have to be authenticated for each and every conveyance. That way we will know that, that the money is not going to be stolen. And that's the way it is. It's going to be very interesting, actually, to see how we organize ourselves. We're not going to have all of these what they call black funds. There's going to be a lot of background work that's going to have to be done, because most of the gold is buried in the Philippines, and there have been reports that some helicopters have started flying away with this gold. And I've asked the military to start looking into these claims. And don't laugh, because we recognize, of course, that the U.S. military has been dominated by a group called the Knights of Malta. That's why they did not accept the offer of gold. But the way it works in the U.S. military is there are also committees like the Joint Japan-U.S. Committee under the Status of Forces Agreement. And so there are people outside that chain of corrupt command who are working in Japan. And so we've been working with them. And that's why I'm relatively optimistic that we are going to have a smooth transition to the rule of law. As the Global Debt Facility's lawyer, I filed a notarial protest with the Director General of the Universal Postal Union's International Bureau, Bishar Abdurrahman Hussain. And this said very clearly that the Federal Reserve and the U.S. Treasury Department did not possess the U.S. monetary gold reserves. And I included the Treaty of Versailles gold certificates that are worth over $2 quadrillion, owed to the Global Debt Facility by the Network of Global Corporate Control. And when the Secretary of State of Illinois, as I mentioned, invalidated that financing statement, the Board of Governors went back to him. There's a letter that I've put out on the internet saying you have no authority to invalidate that UCC form. And I really think that we're going to it's not going to be so difficult, because one of the documents that I also tweeted was a response of the Secretary of State of Michigan. I've copied all of the Secretaries of State. They know full well that the Federal Reserve is not, it doesn't have the U.S. monetary gold reserves. It's insolvent, and it is going to be wound down. I just received this afternoon a phone call from somebody who was telling me that they had a good arrangement for how to do this. They were planning on cutting deals. And I said to them right off the bat, without seeing anything, I said, there are no deals that are going to be cut. It is the Board of Governors of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund that are in charge. And we're not going to be cutting side deals in back rooms. All of this is going to be out there in front of the people for them to see. And that's, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. There are a lot of issues that are going to have to be resolved. I've got a list of them. One of these things is the draft of monetary agreement, and people want to know, how are they going to get the gold? It's going to be in your currency, and we're going to be able to see how much currency goes out to the public. That's how you're going to know that you're getting your gold. It's not going to be very easy, I think, to steal the gold. We're going to make sure that it's not so easy to steal the gold. But of course, we have got to get an accurate baseline, and that's going to take some doing, because we're not just talking about the monetary gold reserves. We're talking about artworks. We're talking about gemstones. We actually have been slaving, whereas we're rich. In reality, we're rich, and we have to find out how rich we are. So that's one of the things that we have to be looking at. One of the things we have to do is we have to calculate the historic price of gold, because if the gold is in the currency, and these envelopes can be opened, if you don't have the price right, it stands to reason that people are going to take the gold out if the gold has been undervalued. So the way we're going to be doing that, I've asked UNCTAD to look at the historic price of gold over centuries in the major currencies, because gold has served as currency from time immemorial. So we're going to see what we can do to accurately calculate the price of gold. One of the questions, of course, is the excess currencies. There's been a lot of extra currencies printed, including a lot of extra US dollars, and we're going to have to figure out how these excess speculation, because those are not going to be converted into aurum. That's the name of the bills that are going to be used for the gold. But you're going to find out, all of you, you're going to find out what the Board of Governors decides, and you yourself can hold your own Minister of Finance accountable for letting you know. So that's how it's going to be going forward. And the most important thing is really going to be in the local communities, how you hold your own local boards. And in the United States, we're talking about the county executives. I have not been successful in dealing with the governors. You can see, if you go back in your history books, that it was the governors who in 1934, with absolutely no authority, were the ones that pledged the citizens to paying back the central bankers' debt. They had no authority to do this, but they did. I started, you'll see in all of the documents that I have really worked very hard at each and every level in holding the representatives of the people to account. And I've gone to the very central organizations. For example, in the accounting profession, I've gone to the International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions. I've gone to the agencies that represent the accounting firms, the IFAC, and these groups have been complicit with the network of global corporate control. So we are going to have to really work to find ways of getting the job done without entrusting it to the very professions that have been betraying the people. So there aren't going to be any shortcuts, but the one thing that we have to rush with is to make sure that the paper currencies are replaced, because they're not stable, and we don't want to go into another dark ages. One of the questions I've been asked is, what about some of the candidates for the 2016 elections? There's been a lot of discussion about them, and I'm sorry to say that there's only one candidate, that's Rick Santorum, who has even come close to getting at some of these issues. And that was when Rick Santorum was asked about this attempt to nuke Charleston, South Carolina. Other than that, Trump, no, I'm sorry. I have been in touch with his campaign. I've been in touch with his son. I've been in touch with his lawyer. And he is absolutely, he's more of the same, which is to say that this is not, this is a distraction. We have got to be talking about the fundamental corruption that we have to address, rather than Tweedledum and Tweedledee that are not really giving us any choice at all. And these are very serious issues. One of the things I also wanted to mention, just briefly, is what's been going on in the Ukraine. I was at Ocean City, Maryland last week with my family, and we saw a young Ukrainian student from Odessa who said that her parents had asked her to try to find a way to stay in this country because of the terrible things that are going on in the Ukraine. I had a Ukrainian roommate for 4 years, Nadia Karpe, in New York, and they're a wonderful people. They don't deserve what's been happening in that country. But we've discussed how there's every reason to be optimistic as we work together in the cooperative called the Bretton Woods institutions to end corruption in the international financial system. Roughly 3/4 of the American public consistently prefers that the United States act together jointly with other nations in foreign affairs. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Hudis. Thank you very much, and good night to all of you, especially to my friend, I call him Bjorn in Sweden. I believe he stayed up. It's now past midnight for him. Thank you, and until next week, I'm your host, Karen Hudis.